Welcome back to the War and Peace Baseball Podcast. I'm Farrod Makazi here with Alex Rudy.
Yep.
And Alex Yui.
Hello.
Yes, I do greatly apologize that we have not had a video up the last 2 weeks, but we've had a couple problems with our videos, but hopefully this one will go smoothly. So for our podcast, we will be going over what many baseball fans will be doing around this time of the year, fantasy baseball. We will be giving you advice to help you get that top spot in the standings by the end of the year. And we will finish it off by doing our normal top 5 players of the week. This week is our shortstop. And, of course, our teams of the week. And that's about it. So, let's get right to it. Over the past few weeks, or not weeks, years, and in your experiences, both of you, and what has been your experience, what has been your overall strategy in the past few years?
Well, for me in particular, fantasy baseball is just extremely fun because you get to experiment with lots of different players and kind of realize different things about players that you have no business knowing about just watching TV. And for me, it's more fun going after those middle tier guys partway through the season, adding and dropping. More than anything, that'll get you that top spot, because most people in your league, I'm sure, are going to show up to the draft, pick their players, and sit back all year and watch what happens, when you could be out there every week looking at who's been having good stretches at the plate, who are pitchers that are, projected to get hot for certain stretches of time, and that really is a game changer. It led me to the fantasy playoffs in my league last year, even though I had a pretty crappy season in terms of my top players. I had Jose Fernandez go down pretty early last year, and that was a bummer, of course. And this year again, I drafted Yu Darvish, and of course, in recent news, he's going to be most likely having Tommy John surgery. Just my luck. But, at least I'm used to it, so I'll know how to handle it a little bit better at least. As for my strategy with the draft, I don't take it too seriously in that I try to get every single round as perfect as possible. I go after guys that I know I want to work with throughout the season, and a lot of it depends on, the demand, of course. This year, one player that I really wish I had last year, of course, is Jose Altuve, and, I drafted him pretty early on because he's going to be a very high demand player, even though I don't project him being quite as valuable as he was last year necessarily. I mean, he could be, but I don't see him as that kind of player. But it's more about making sure you don't wait too long for certain players that you want. And, a lot of these players that I want are not necessarily players that go in the early rounds. I try to do most of my work in, 6 through 10 rounds. Those are some of the players that are going to put you in a way better position. In the first few rounds, you're going to have the same guys going really early: Trout, Cabrera, Bautista, those big bats in your lineup that are all going to be gone first round. And then you kind of go through that, and after a few rounds, you realize they're all gone. But then after that is when I really take off and try to acquire some guys that I think have potential for big years, but haven't necessarily proven themselves yet, which is a different strategy than a lot of people take. I know you, Rudy, for example, are really cautious and go after players who have really proven themselves, which is a really good approach as well, if you want to get into that a little bit.
Yeah, I won my last league that I think you were also in, Alex, you were in last year, basically, betting on 2 principles, and they largely carried me throughout the year. And one was, over-relying on just straight numbers, statistics, and I firmly believe that a sample size of 3 years or larger is what you need to really determine and predict how well a player is going to be in the next season. And I don't really think it's safe to bet on guys who've had consistent production for at least two at the least, and 3 hopefully seasons before you can start drafting them in those upper rounds and expect
which is
continued
why
success.
guys like Jose Altuve wouldn't fit that bill
Yeah, he would
necessarily
not fit
for you, but for me,
1 year. So,
I see him as a very repeatable type
yeah.
player,
My
and that's more what I go
my
for.
category is more like the Cano types who maybe they haven't had a peak year in the past 3 or so, but they're definitely consistent contributors. They're always healthy, and they play positions of weakness that you know that it's a safe bet to get them. And the other main strategy I rely on is because I usually concentrate on safe statistical bets, relying on if I'm in a points league, how much points they average, if I'm in rotisserie, they consistently either are extremely good in specific categories or solid across the board. Because I rely on very safe guys, and not too many risks, such as a Jose Altuve or let's say maybe R.A. Dickey after I'd Cy Young year. I have to make up for that and with young guys. And so my team usually consists of a lot of maybe medium, not outstanding, consistent contributors, as well as a lot of high upside, high risk, young players, let's say last year.
I believe you carried Christian Yelich last year too, right?
Like Anthony Rendon. Sorry, what were you saying?
You carried Christian Yelich for much of the season last year too. That worked out for you.
He's pretty consistent, but he would actually be perfect. He would be a combination of those two philosophies. But I'm more thinking like, I had maybe a Jake Odorizzi who is fine in a deep league, or a, I don't know, like you said,
Drew Smiley. Drew Smiley is one of those guys for you too. That
would be another great example. I mean, obviously you're gonna have your Steve Pierces and your Lonnie Chisenhall, your mid-season acquisitions that just come out of nowhere.
Lonnie Chisenhall last year.
You're taking risks to continue their performance. And that's always a tough thing to know when to bite that bullet and just pick that guy up and when to maximize his value. But largely, I would say if you go into the draft and rely on maybe taking guys who are consistent performers, who are in their prime age seasons, and while filling your bench maybe with some high risk young prospects here and there, I think that's a tool of success. I don't think it's always a good move just to go base your draft exclusively on last year's performance, essentially.
Yeah. By the way, Rudy, good job working in that you beat me in our fantasy league last year. Well, very casually at the beginning of that.
Low-key.
For the record, I did come first overall in the season standings and in the playoffs. He beat me in the finals only because I picked up Jason Day as a bit of a joke, inside joke between us, and that didn't work out so well for me.
He's
not
it for being so cocky.
It wasn't so much cockiness. It was just like, I don't really care at this point.
Okay. Well, I'm still enjoying my victory, so.
I know you are. You bring it up very frequently.
For me, personally, fantasy, first thing when I'm entering a draft, I look at the league's point system and that stuff, because I want to find a way to make sure I can get the most points out of every single thing. Like my league last year, our point system was screwed up. It was just awful.
All your pitching was pretty much
negative,
right?
So we couldn't pick up any pitchers unless they were great strikeout pitchers like Kershaw, or they were like closers. Basically, that's all we could have done, or else we were lost about 20 points every time one of our starting pitchers actually was playing that day. So that's the first thing I do. And the second thing I do is I've told you guys this earlier. I'm basically a mix between what you guys do. I feel it out, and I get guys that I feel like I can trust to be what they were the year before. But I also rely on the 3 years before, the 2 years before. I need to know that this guy isn't just this 1 year peak year and then the next year that he's just not great. Like Rudy came up with Cano. He's never had this amazing standout year in his career, because every year is so consistent. It's not necessarily, there's no standout year. and then everything goes down. It's basically, those are the type of guys I'd like to get, because it's, I'd be looking at a pretty safe bet getting someone that's proven, rather than someone that's, oh, he did amazing one year and then suddenly he could do bad this year. So that's mine. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, again, I just wanted to reiterate that for me, the draft isn't where the league is won. It's
Oh no, it's not.
with your ads and drops. Definitely.
I don't know if that's true. I think it's 50-50 at the least.
Because for me personally, I felt like I had a pretty bad draft last year in this same league that I was talking about before. I didn't have much pitching depth at all, and a lot of my pitching came from players that I picked up throughout the season that ended up having decent years for me. And it was a head-to-head league too, which was partially why that worked out pretty well. I was able to, and it was also unlimited ad drops, which is something that does make it very easy to take this style of approach, but there's a lot of leagues out there that, limit your ads and drops, and that is going to be interesting. I'm doing one of those for the first time, so that'll be a little bit different for me, so I have to be a little more careful with that.
I think that strategy depends on who's in your league and your format, and I think that really varies on situation to situation. I mean, you're not going to lose your season and your draft, but I think I don't think this is really
you're gonna get that's where you get started in your draft, and then you use the adding and dropping to help you build on that team. So like my team last year, one of my favorite parts was just picking up guys in the middle of the year and just seeing how well they contributed. Like even Chisenhall, I picked him up when he was hot. Oh no, I picked him up like a couple of weeks before he went. He just.
Did you? Okay, the important question is, did you have him for his 5 for 5 games?
Yes, I did. I had him.
I did as well.
I had him for all of those games. And then once he started going down, I dropped him. My favorite part was just picking up those guys, and I think that's going to be one of the most important parts this year. You have to figure out who's on fire and who's not, and just take your risk and get the guys that will help you, especially in the head-to-head matchups.
I agree. So another interesting aspect of the fantasy decision-making process is to decide players coming back from injury. Are they going to be the kind of player that they were beforehand? Or are they going to be much lower tier player? There's a few of those guys that are coming back this year, and you have some questions about them.
Yeah, basically, I have a couple questions. Who are the most dependable and reliable guys in the draft that are going to be there, that are going to be consistent contributors to your team? Who are, just naming off a couple.
Well,
do you want to go first?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think there is no doubt that, Trout, McCutchen, Stanton, Goldschmidt, Kershaw, the top five, Felix, Cano, like we said, Miguel Cabrera, the usual guys, no matter what format, they're guaranteed to be outstanding. Because, I'm looking at this ESPN production rankings, and, they have Carlos Gomez as their 6th overall player. And then, in my other fantasy baseball league I used last year, which was Keepers, he was an average outfielder, maybe slightly above average. He was nowhere near the top 10. And I know this is predictions for next season, but they don't have his stats being too much better. So I think that's interesting. But I think the guys I named are the guys, and bearing season-ending injuries, no matter what format, no matter what league, you're guaranteed success with those guys.
Yeah, I think it just seems to trend this way that most of your reliable players are most likely going to be outfielders, which I don't know if it's because of the position of the player, what kind of players they are, but it seems like a lot of the other types of first and third basemen that you get that are, much higher tier, they have these kind of nagging things. Like Miguel Cabrera has been banged up quite a bit. I don't know if that's just how he takes care of himself, but that's one example of his potential downside is that you're not going to get him for as many games necessarily as you will get Andrew McCutchen or Michael Brantley or guys like that. And I think, especially with the outfield, you have a lot of these outfielders are multi-positional too, which is helpful, but not necessarily gonna be a deal maker for you if you're looking for versatile players that produce at a high level. Another player that's very versatile at in position-wise and has been produced very well in last season in particular was Anthony Rendon, who had second base and third base eligibility, which is pretty unique considering he was one of the top producers among any position player. And he's an interesting case. You don't know exactly what you're going to get from him next year, but you really want to go after him early. There's something about him that just makes you want to go after him. Wouldn't you say, Rudy, that even though he just had his one breakout year, there's something about him compared to these other players that broke out that shows he's more of a consistent model?
He was a top prospect, and he did pretty well his rookie season before that.
He was, but you've seen plenty of top prospects out there that get really hot early, and then you don't know what kind of output they're really gonna have in the future. Like George Springer, he had an amazing stretch, but you definitely saw a lot of signs of, he could really slip into a point where he is a real negative for my team if I'm not careful with that. And Rendon doesn't seem like that kind of guy. He has that very consistent model only after one season already.
Two statistics that are extremely important to this situation that I think people don't really mention enough. And I'm a firm believer in them, but not everyone might be. And that's FIP, which is fielding independent percentage, I believe. And BABIP, which is batting average balls in play. And FIP basically gives you the essentially ERA of what the pitcher should have done if all the plays that should have been made were made. So, and it's not that errors, it's like those gappers, those ones through the hole that have been like an average defense making all the plays they make. That's their pitcher, that's the pitcher's ERA with that. And then the batting average balls in play is, essentially, I believe it's very complicated, but I believe the simplest way to put it, I guess it's, I'm trying to put into words, I guess it's how well you get on base. Someone can find a better description for me, but it gives you a different version of batting average that more shows how much luck, I guess, is involved. And let's say, the average is about 300. So essentially, if you look at those two stats with their baselines and compare them to the ERA and average, it really helps to determine if a player had a lucky season or an unlucky season, and so that you can either buy low or sell high or buy or for this year's draft, if that makes sense.
Yeah, getting pretty technical there.
Yeah, sorry.
I personally don't use those statistics, but I understand what you're saying. There's a lot to do with kind of understanding the ability of these players in terms of how long they can last like this, because you don't know how long they're going to be able to continue to pitch the way they have if the conditions around them are different.
Oh wait,
happens every season.
Can I just say we're batting up? So batting average balls in play measures how many of a batter's balls in play goes for hits, or how many balls in play against the pitcher go for hits, excluding home runs. So,
right.
It's your batting average without home runs, taking account for, sacks, at-bats, strikeouts. It's a more, I guess, accurate batting average is the best way to put it.
So, with that stat, is it if you have a higher percentage that it is considered that it's more luck? Yeah, okay.
So the higher,
if you have a higher one,
average,
the higher that is, the
the
easier it is to sell high and get rid of him.
Exactly.
Get some kind of good return. That's
so.
a good point.
But FIP is the opposite. So if you have a really, so I'm sorry, FIP is like, so the higher your FIP, that and say you have a high FIP and a low ERA, that means you're getting really lucky. But if you have a low FIP and a high ERA, you're having a very unlucky season. If that makes sense.
See.
Yeah, that's perfectly clear.
Okay,
Actually, those are obviously a bit more sabermetric, and that's not everyone's cup of tea. But I think if you're really kind of stuck between drafting one player or another, I think it's really helpful to look at those stats.
Yeah.
So going off of, like, I know we just did the dependable and reliable guys. There's some guys that are injury prone, or some guys that you can't trust necessarily. Like, who would be the most dangerous and risky guys that you'd want to stay away from in this draft?
This year more than any, like last year he did a pretty good job with it, but Victor Martinez is definitely an injury riddled player, and that was a rare case last year where he played pretty much the whole season and had a very nice MVP campaign. One of the best producers. I had him on my team. He was my best bat by far, and I don't see that being the case in the future. He had some problems earlier this spring already that we've talked about with his knee, and I think he's going to recover okay from that, but you'd never know exactly. You know, I have a feeling you're going to see stints of 2 to 3 weeks at a time where he's trying to nurse himself and not being able to produce.
First of all, I want to say a prime example of my point is Jose Altuve, who's batting balls in play. Batting average balls in play last year was 360 when that league average was 299. So he's a prime guy not to draft high because of that example. He got really...
Well, he swiped some bags too, so that...
obviously still a great second baseman. I'm just saying watch out for the luck. Another guy, I would say I would kind of try to stay away from a little bit. Not like stay away as in don't get him, but I feel like Madison Bumgarner get drafted too high because of his
postseason
playoffs. And he's outstanding ace, and he can be the number one on any of your teams, but he isn't Kershaw. He isn't Felix. He's a silent contender every year, but he's not that. He's incredible, but he's not on that transcendent level in the regular season.
Yeah, believe it or not, he is hittable.
Yeah.
Very.
And he got
the Royals still
pretty good in his
that.
first couple spring training starts, I noticed. I'm not saying that I'm going off of that for the season, but it's just kind of a nice refresher that, oh man, people can actually put the bat on this guy, and it's just a wake up call from that amazing October he had. So
yeah, and I'd also watch out for. Do you have any people you have in mind?
Well, basically, this isn't a guy I would stay away from because obviously he's probably one of the best players in the game. But he's very, very injury prone, is Troy Tulowitzki. I'd get him. He's gonna probably be picked up not pretty high, but he's gonna be in the top rounds. And I wouldn't get him that early because I don't know how many games he's gonna play for me. So I'm not, especially coming off that hip surgery, or whatever he had.
I actually disagree with that a little bit. Just for this one reason. He is so insanely valuable at the shortstop.
Oh, no. He's extremely valuable. He's just gonna be...
Even if he only plays half the year, the fact is that once he's gone, you'll probably still have a backup shortstop who's average for the rest of your league. And so just depending on how your league is formatted and set up, I would still draft him maybe second or third round even, just because that's a huge risk. That's actually something I would not do as a strategy. But I don't know. Depending on how that draft is going for you, and if you feel like maybe in the first rounds you filled up your most important positions, and you're willing to take a risk, and the rest of the guys left are pretty deep in all the positions. He's a great guy to take a flyer on. He's probably the highest risk, highest reward player.
That's exactly what I was gonna say. He's very high. Yeah, he's the definition of high risk, high reward.
Definitely.
Okay.
So yeah, I think we covered some of the most important injury risk players out there, so we can go and move on to some other types of
Any quick
fantasy players.
Sleepers
Sleepers.
you guys got?
One that I had last year that was probably my best sleeper and probably one of my best pitchers on my staff was Scott Kazmir for the A's.
Oh wow.
And he went a lot deeper into the season, maintaining a low ERA than I thought he would. I mean, near the end he kind of started falling off, but I don't see that as a concern as much. I still might take him at some point in this draft if I'm looking at, a similar, he's in a similar setting with the people he's pitching against, the teams he's pitching against, and I don't think he's quite done yet. I think he's going to be able to run you in 3 months into the season maybe and maintain a low ERA. You might want to be careful with him after that because he tends to become more hittable somehow. But that was one of mine that worked out really well for me.
I would go with Marcus Stroman. He was dropped in my league after he was horrendous as a relief pitcher, and I picked him up for the starter, and he proceeded to be an excellent starting pitcher for us this season. A lot of people doubted him because he's a small 5'9", and I don't know if you guys ever seen pictures of his dad. He got kind of mini internet sensation because he's insanely jacked and he's probably 6'1", and so he definitely didn't get those genes, but he is a great pitcher with great stuff. He reminds me a lot of Jordana Ventura, and that's another guy I would put in that same category. Is that, they might not even have the best stats or the best numbers, but they have great stuff. They were always highly touted prospects, and they've had stretches of dominance, and that's enough to convince me. I think their peripheral stats are good enough that you can expect consistency, at least at an average level. Those guys are definitely low risk, high reward.
I agree. Farbod?
As in sleepers, there are a couple guys that you could get that no one they're not going to get taken.
No, don't forget about Paul Goldschmidt, you guys. Do not forget about him.
Nobody's
not a
did.
sleeper.
No, I'm saying drafters, because he, depending on how your draft ranking format works, he might not show up very high because he didn't do much last year, but he's...
No, in
well,
ESPN,
he got hurt
shows
last
up.
year.
He's top 5.
But I think
ESPN
Yahoo does it by last year's performance, so...
Do they? Okay. Well, he'll be there.
Yeah,
so don't you worry about that.
Saying don't forget about him.
Oh no.
Not you guys specifically, I mean drafters.
Makes sense.
He could be the best first baseman in the league.
Oh yeah. So, for me, some sleepers, I don't have necessarily big sleepers, but just some interesting cases, as in these players, like Danny Duffy. He's a pretty good player. He's not gonna get taken, but he's gonna be a good contributor to your team. There's even guys who didn't perform well last year, Jed Jerko. He's a young guy, but in that new lineup, in that new, better lineup, I feel like he's gonna have a better year. So there's some guys that it's just some guys that you don't know. I mean, it's just, sleepers are not predictable a lot, but these are just some interesting guys.
One of my other ones that was sort of a sleeper last year for me was Adam LaRoche, who went, I think I got him really late. It was 16th or 17th round, and he was one of my top producers consistently. I had Victor Martinez in the mix too, and I still tried to find a way for Adam LaRoche to play every single day because he, when he was healthy, he missed a short period of time. Wasn't too bad, but he was one of the best producers in that stretch of time, and I think he is one of the more consistent players that you see out there, and that carries a lot of power in his bat.
Yeah.
And that a lot of people forget about.
I have 3 other sleepers, just to mention. I have Shin-Soo Choo. He was horrible last year, but he had ankle and elbow injuries throughout the year, Really, I don't think he's ever really completely healthy. He plays in a great hitter's park. Probably some protection in his lineup as long as, Beltre and Fielder, sorry, State.
Another man who's
And I think
coming
he
back
could
from
be a nice
injury.
bounce back candidate to have at the end of the draft. Michael Pineda, if he's healthy, is a really good starting pitcher. He barely played in 3 seasons, I believe, since he had a great rookie year.
Pintor?
But, sorry?
Pintor?
Pintor? Yeah.
Pintor?
And then, guy I would drop at the end of your draft is Rougned Odor, who's an everyday second baseman for the Wright Rangers now that Jurickson Profar sadly is going to have season-ending shoulder surgery once again.
That's just a sad case. He's been hurt, he's been out for the year. He hasn't been played for a long time.
Yeah.
And he's supposed to be one of the top guys.
He played a little bit in the Winter League, Odor is probably, I don't think anyone's really looking at him as a key contributor. He's only 21 years old.
He's not a bad player.
I would really suggest, especially if you don't get a top second baseman, I would really suggest just waiting on him to get a snap at the end of the draft. He should at least be average for that position. And I really recommend, he's not really great, but I just recommend him as a guy to watch out for. And then the ultimate sleeper is Danny Salazar. I think it's going to be his 3rd year, basically, of being a sleeper. And he really hasn't put it together yet, but I'm confident that he'll finally have that breakout year. I'm surprised ESPN ranks Scooter Gennett 227 on the rankings. He had a pretty solid last year for a second baseman. I thought it was pretty surprising.
Wow.
Right. I mean, you have these guys out there that are everyday players that you don't even consider as options for your fantasy team, and that's kind of an interesting case because sometimes they produce pretty decently. If you just need somebody to fill a spot that you kind of screwed up on in your draft or whatever, and for some reason he hasn't gone yet, you have these guys that I would say it's still better to go after these players that play every day for their team rather than go after these guys that are
everyone I named
emerging.
All the guys I named play every day.
Who's that?
The pitchers, all the guys I named are everyday players.
Right, exactly.
Oh, you're saying
you don't think of them. They're everyday players for their teams, and they're not even considered in a lot of people's minds as potential starters for their own fantasy team.
Yeah, I think we're in a situation where you're really deep with players who all give about the same amount of production. There aren't that many true superstars. Outside the top 10, I think. I think the production kind of plateaus really quickly after it. I could be wrong, but
there's definitely a point where good enough is good enough, and then you have the point where your plus players, you have to stack them against each other and make the tough decisions. So,
Carbo, you'd be disappointed to know that Matt Schumacher is 280th out of 300 on the ESPN rankings.
There's your sleeper.
I already have him though.
These rankings are weird. Why is Mike this is strange.
Yeah.
I wonder what their, basis is. Why is, Nick Markakis 284th? He's not good, but depending on how many people are in your league, he's, average production.
Yeah.
Or, I don't know. I mean.
Yeah, he's in that conversation there.
Mike McCarthy gives you Brandon, sorry.
Brandon. Mike. Everybody's Mike. Okay. So I think that's all we have to talk about in terms of the draft. I know.
Wait. I have
all of us
one
have
more
a draft
question.
coming up do you now?
For you guys, it's more of a fun question though. If you had the number 1 pick right now, who would you take? Would you take?
That's such a boring question.
No, I know, but would you take? I'm just interested. Would you take a hitter or a pitcher?
I would take Trout.
I would take Trout.
Actually, I would take Stanton.
Ooh.
I'm taking Stanton. Ooh. He's gonna be the MVP next year.
Of a different league.
I cannot argue that, so.
I'm taking Stanton.
Nobody's saying Mike Trout's not gonna be the MVP next year either.
No, Stanton's gonna be the MVP of both leagues. He's gonna be so good.
They're gonna make a new award for him?
Yeah.
It's gonna be the Stanton Award.
That's fair enough.
He's gonna win the Babe Ruth Award for best hitter in the league.
2016,
It will happen. He will invent that award.
In 2016, there's not going to be an MVP for both leagues. It's just going to be called a Stanton Award.
Yeah. But wait, shouldn't you be picking Andrew McCutchen before Trout because MLB Network had him ranked higher in center field?
I don't.
True?
Yeah.
I think in their top 10 they ranked.
What is the logic for that?
I don't know.
There's none. They put him in whatever formula they had.
Trout didn't have
was ranked high.
as good.
I mean, Trout was considered number 1 overall when in their list that was made by people, but in their shredder of all these statistics that are compiled, they had McCutchen higher.
That's strange. I don't really understand.
Yeah, I don't know. I think they just wanted attention more than anything.
Oh yeah, I was just confused. I was angry.
So anyway, I was saying I know all of us have drafts coming up. Farbode, you and I have a draft tonight too for one of our leagues.
Yes.
And
yes.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that. And also, something interesting that I thought I'd bring up is I'm planning on being a part of this league where, just to screw around, we're going to make a league that only keeps track of player home runs and pitcher strikeouts. So that'll be kind of a different outlook on things.
So wait, how does that work? Is every other category 0?
You just set the only categories that count for anything are home runs and strikeouts for pitchers, and then you draft accordingly.
That's pretty cool.
Just something to.
That's
I mean, haven't heard of that being done. It seems like a lot less maintenance than a regular fantasy league anyway, so that's good. So yeah, anyway, that'll conclude our fantasy discussion for today. We still have to talk about our top 5 players at shortstop right now, as well as our teams of the week, the Reds and the Giants, the champion Giants.
Defending champs.
Oh wait, we didn't do position, right?
We were about to.
Oh, okay.
Just said
the shortstop.
Maybe I spaced out.
Okay, that's fine. Anyway, let's get to that though. Top 5 at shortstop. You want to go ahead and start, Farbode, or would you like to?
All right. So my number 5 shortstop has about I forget how many years ago it was, but he had a bunch of drama around him about PEDs. But right now he's Johnny Peralta, of course, but right now he's still a pretty good hitter, hopefully off the PEDs. Good pop. Defense, he's decent, at least. And, his WAR just shows he's one of the top.
Yeah, I love to say that's pretty interesting. According to Fangraphs, he led shortstop with WAR last year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Apparently he's a doubles machine.
Apparently he's not awful at defense, but judging by just how he looks, you would think he would be terrible.
Yeah.
Like, you would imagine his range to be extremely low.
Maybe his range is bad, but he just doesn't make any errors.
Yeah.
My number 4 shortstop is the guy who led I forget if it was only American League or if it's the whole MLB. And he led the shortstops in fielding percentage last year. It was, Eric Ibar. He did not get the Gold Glove, but he's still one of the, I am being kind of an Angels guy, but he's a guy who drives and runs for the spot he is in the lineup and for the shortstop. He gets on base. He's pretty fast too, and he's one of the strongest arms in baseball. He's a great defender. Number 3, I have Ian Desmond. He's not the greatest defender, but he's one of the best offensive shortstops, not as an average, but he hits for power and he drives and runs. And he's very valuable in that he's gonna get a great contract by the end of this year. Number 2, I have, since he plays more than Tulo, I have Andrelton Simmons. Number 2, since he plays, he's probably the highlight reel as defense. And he's just one of my favorite shortstops just to watch. Even though he's not a great hitter, like exactly yet, but he's extremely young. And like I said, he's almost a defensive highlight reel every night. With his strong arm, his diving catches, diving plays. I just love watching it. Number 1, I have Troy Tulowitzki. He's a very risky player, even though he's never on the field, it seems like. He's still a monster when he's on the field. He hits for average power. He drives and runs. He's a great defender. And when he actually plays, he's also a highlight reel every night for defensively and offensively. And other than just being injury prone, other than the fact that he's injury prone, he's the top shortstop in the game.
By the way, I feel like we should mention that Zobrist probably won't be on these lists, even though he does play short. He's just not.
He plays like 18.
We feel like we have to say this every single time. We'll kind of bring him up.
Well,
in
I
his
mean,
own different class.
Ben Zobrist plays like 18 different positions.
Yeah,
We could have
18.
we could have a position just like utility guys, but
That'd just be Zobrist.
yeah. All right.
So he wins.
Yeah. So
Rudy, do you have your?
Yeah. Number 5, I'm also gonna go with Johnny Peralta, and I would actually put him higher just by last year's stats, except I don't really trust him that much. He had that steroid suspension. He's not always healthy, I think. And he seems like a prime guy I feel like he's peaked, but he's really, he's great defensively and offensively as far as we can. It's weird, but he is. All the stats say he's a very good shortstop. Number 4, I'm gonna go with, what was I thinking? I think I'm kind of actually backwards. It's a lot easier for my head for this specific rankings.
Okay, Rudy.
Sorry.
Bend the rules.
I gotta mess up. So number 1, it's too risky. You have to. Never healthy, but last year he had what was it? Offensive WAR. He had 4.6, I think. 4.77. I don't think he even played half the season, which is ridiculously outstanding. And he's arguably the best player in baseball if he ever played a whole season. Number 2, I would go with Jose Reyes.
Let's please see if we can keep this one in one piece.
Alright. Number 2, I would go with Jose Reyes, because he's also a guy who's always injury prone, as is kind of I feel like all these guys are, but just offensively and defensively, he's a really outstanding player. He also, I don't know, I don't really think he gets mentioned too often, but he's still a great shortstop, maybe. And then, 3, Anderson Simmons. It's just, his defensive value is just insane. He had almost 4 defensive WAR last year. Even if he doesn't hit, he's just ridiculously valuable. Just as a defensive player, he's arguably the best defensive player in all the major leagues. And, if he ever really gets that bat going,
watch out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
4, I'm gonna give JJ Hardy the benefit of the doubt. He really had an off year last year, but he's still a really good defensive shortstop. He had 2 defensive WAR last year. And I think, depending on how you look at it, he also had, and he still had, according to Fangraphs, still had generated 3.5 WAR. And I know I'm saying WAR a lot, and that's a stupid way just to base everything off.
It's the name of our podcast.
But yeah, that's a good point. But he had a really down year last year for power. But I don't know. I think he's a bounce back candidate. Him and Johnny Peralta could football for me. And I would say I'm gonna have to tie that with Ian Desmond. All 3 of those guys, I think, kind of that sub-elite category where they're really good, but they're not outstanding in any one thing, and they either have prime regression candidates or prime positive regression candidates for next season.
Okay then.
Sorry, I overcomplicated it, but
yeah.
That's my favorite thing
Well,
to do.
since you had a tie, I feel I'll start my list off with a tie at number 5. I have Eric Ibar and Alcides Escobar at my number 5. I feel like Ibar has always been that consistent shortstop that hits, runs, plays good defense, does it all. And I think Escobar is really transforming himself into that kind of player. He's been hitting for higher average. His defense is amazing. It's up there with any shortstop in the game. Pretty close to Simmons, not quite the same, but he's definitely really fun to watch from that point of view. And he's also I think he's going to be an even better player than he was last year because of his playoff experience now, and he carried himself pretty well throughout all of that, and that's got to help him out some more too. But Ivar's been there and he's been at that level, so I got to include him in there as well. 4, I have Andrelton Simmons, the defense god, and I really think he is the best defender on this list, and maybe on any list that we've had so far. But the offense is not quite there, and I'm also not exactly sure if it's ever going to get to a point where it's high enough to get him higher on this list. Another guy that has not figured everything out is Ian Desmond, and I have as my number 3. Definitely could use a little bit of a higher average to make himself look like a much attractive player, cut down on strikeouts a bit. But he's been producing offensively regardless, drives in tons of runs and hits for power, and that's something that you don't get from a lot of shortstops. But I don't know if it's ever even talked about, but he doesn't have great defensive ability right now, but I think he has more defensive potential than anybody else that is considered a below average defender, because he is extremely athletic, he has amazing range, and most of his fielding problems are with his arm and how he throws. And I think he's going to reach a point where it really is one of those defensive gods that maybe not Andrelton Simmons tier, but I'll see it as Escobar tier, kind of shortstop defensively. Number 2, Jose Reyes. In 2 words, he's a spark plug. That's pretty much it. He still brings so much energy into the field. He hits for average runs, plays amazing defense, can hit some home runs too. He's just all around, always into every single game he plays, and that's really important to have from your battery position up the middle there. Number 1, Tulowitzki. That's all. That's all I have to say about him.
That's all.
I think enough has been said about his ability, and everybody knows about it, and there's nothing more to say. I have nothing new to add to Tulowitzki. So that is my list, though.
Yes.
So that will conclude our top 5 shortstops at each position. A lot of consistency with those. A few players cracked lists and did not crack others. But it is time for us to move on to our teams of the week, the Reds and the Giants. We'll go ahead and start with the Reds. They had a bit of a below-average year by their standards, and they've been a playoff team in this decade, and they've kind of been falling off since a few years ago when nobody really knows exactly what happened. Just things started falling apart. The other teams got better too.
Yeah.
And the Pirates, of course, are there and taking care of business now more than they used to. And it seems like other teams are catching up to them is the main lesson to that. A lot of similar faces there, but, something just isn't the same. So.
For me, personally, this team, they had, other than trading Simon, however you say it, and Latos away, they had a very boring offseason. And their team overall, they have some great, exciting guys like Chapman and some good players, Frazier, and, exciting in the speed, Billy Hamilton. But this team overall right now is not very exciting. If everyone on their team played at their full potential and full ability, yeah, they're a very exciting team, pretty good team.
If I could invent the money tree, I would do it.
Yeah. So, exactly, basically.
I can't. But you don't, wait, continue if you're done.
So,
You're not done.
Right now, I don't I don't like a lot of this team. I like Johnny Cueto and Homer Bailey, even though he's questionable for opening day. That's basically their rotation right now. And then there's Leak, and then I don't really care about the rest of the rotation.
Wow.
I love Frazier, just the player he is. Marlon Byrd, not really. Billy Hamilton, he's just there for his speed. Jay Bruce is one of those guys, if he can get back to his former, power and average, like decent average type of hitting, he's a very, good player to have, but I don't know. His season last year was just horrendous. Brandon Phillips is a guy that's always going to be there. He's always just fun to watch, whether he's like flipping balls under his.
Yeah, he had a bit of a down year last year, and he's another guy that I'm kind of looking to make a decent comeback. I don't think he's lost anything.
No, he has not. Joey Votto, I'm rooting for him. I want him to be coming back. I know he's your favorite man in the whole world, Alex Huey.
Okay, but no need to overstate things here.
But still, I'm rooting for him to come back. He's a great player, and I don't know. I just like how he plays and type of hitter he is. Johnny Cueto, and like I said, Johnny Cueto and Homer Bailey are basically the only parts of that rotation that I'm interested in. And then my favorite player on that team is probably their closer, Aroldis Chapman, and he's the only exciting part of that team. He's probably one of the reasons, if like Cueto's not pitching that day, he's probably one of the reasons that Reds fans are going to the game. They want to see that 105.
Yeah. So, by the way, I'm ashamed of you for not giving any love to Mr. Devin Mesoraco, who had an amazing season last year and is probably going to be one of the best offensive catchers in the National League.
He could have gotten so much more than the contract they gave him.
Still, but shame on you for not.
My bad.
Okay, you gave a complete rundown of their team, and then I'm waiting for Mesoraco, and then.
Okay, fine. Mesoraco, great player, great offensive.
Okay, thanks. That's all I needed. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, so that's basically a general overview.
I have to say.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think it's just a team on the decline. I think they easily could have been playoff contender for next season if they kept, Latos? Because I think, Latos, Bailey, Cueto, Leaks, and Grande rotation, plus what should be which should be at the very least above average offense. That probably could have been enough to be a playoff contender. Maybe not make it, but a contender. Instead they chose a different direction where they traded away Simone and Latos for no one really notable. I think Bailey just got hurt. I think he broke his forearm.
Yeah, he got forearm surgery.
So, who knows? He really has been all over the place his career, so who knows if he'll ever even continue what seemed like a resurgence or maybe finally putting everything together last year. They have a lot of question marks. I think their offense could be above average, like I said. It could also be really bad if Votto and Phillips don't return, and Bruce all don't return to their previous forms. Zach Cozart's a complete negative at shortstop. Frazier and Mesoraco and Cueto, Chapman are all stars for the future. That's what they should be able to keep have playing for them for their next run. But I think it's just a declining team.
I
think they're kind of like the Yankees. In the sense that they have talent, they have spots, but they overall they just have too many holes. They made some serious moves the past couple of years, and they're just on the decline. Could they maybe put it all together? Maybe, but more likely they're like an 80-win team.
Well, you look at their team, they've spent a lot of their money already, which is similar to what the Yankees had to deal with. They spent their money on Bruce and Votto and, Homer Bailey even, and they just kind of have to sit back and watch at this point. They don't, you brought up having Cueto. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think this is the last year on the Reds.
Oh, is he a free agent?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. So, there's very little chance that they're going to extend or re-sign him.
Why wouldn't you try to extend him?
It's just too expensive.
What do you think they won't be able to, you're saying?
They won't be able to.
He can get a lot. But
they're going to want to. I think they've tried, but they just aren't able to right now.
I mean, they don't have a particularly deep prospect list, it looks like, either.
No, that's concerning because they're
2 top 30 guys, but they're in the bottom, so of the 30.
Yeah. Their lineup, you kind of went through all the different pieces. As a whole, it looks like a lineup that has the potential to score a lot of runs. Billy Hamilton, I don't think gets enough love. He's, in my opinion, one of the better catalysts in the game as a leadoff hitter. I talked about Jose Reyes, who brings a lot of that kind of energy. Billy Hamilton, with just his speed, is able to do a lot of things in terms of getting on base. And he did a better job of that last year than I think people realize. And I don't think that I do think that he is one of the pieces of that team that can lead them to success.
He still
Especially
only hit 250 with a 250, wait, I'm sorry. We continue, I'll look it up.
okay.
254, that's what it is. With a 250 with a 292 on base percentage. That's not good at getting on base at all.
He only had 292
on base percentage.
on base. I thought it was higher than that.
That's what it says on MLB.com brought the spring training stats first, so I was really confused. But according to last year, in 152 games, 563 at bats, he only had a 292 on base percentage, which really is not good. That does not, and that takes away his entire speed advantage if he can't get on base that more than a third of the time, less than a third of the time.
Right. Well, he has the potential to. He did score 72 runs, and more than anything, I think, is what he can do when he does get on base. He is pretty much almost guaranteed to score if you get one base hit, because he can steal second and third if you need him to. He is able to score on any base hit pretty much from second base, able to go first to third on any ball, any base hit for the most part. So it's an interesting aspect that it's a utility that not many people have, or not many teams have in their leadoff spot.
I just wonder if he'll ever even lead the league in steals.
Well, he might not lead the league in steals necessarily, but he might, just raw speed does a lot more things than just means a lot more things than just stealing bases and what he's able to do. And I think he's not a problem. He's not a hole in their team by any means. So that's all I wanted to say about that. Anything else?
Nope.
Okay. Well, we should move on to our World Series champion Giants that we are just now getting to because they took their wild card spot all the way to the World Series and did not have one of the better records in the league. But nonetheless, there they are again in the even year, and we've been talking about them a lot. But it is time again to bring up the discussion. Do you think they have anything in them for 2015, or do you think they're going to be sitting back and waiting for 2016?
Well, I mean, so if they are going to win in every even year, they can't win this year. So it's our
they can't. They're not allowed.
You can already count them out. So there's 29 teams in the league this year. Just take the Giants out. Give them like the whole year rest, paid vacation. I don't know, but but overall, I like this team because they have talent. They don't have like the standout best position players in the game.
Buster Posey?
No, other than Posey, calm down. But
I'm okay.
Other than Posey, they don't have like the standout like top position players in the game, and their offense, other than Posey, is that good? Can be very streaky at times. Like there's especially like last year, they started off amazing and then they went cold and then they got hot again. So their offense is streaky. This is a team that has talent, but since they don't have any like star other than Posey, they all like, the good thing about the team is that they all play and they complement each other's hitting. They complement each other so well that it makes them a great team. Their pitching, I like Bumgarner, but he's not going to be the .40 ERA during this regular season, like we said earlier. And then Matt Cain, I don't know how he's going to come back. Tim Hudson, Jake Peavy, those guys.
Okay, let me just say really quick. Tim Lincecum's a guy that I'm really excited to see this year.
I'm very interested.
He's not. He's going to be awful.
I'm very interested in how
he has reworked himself this offseason much better than I thought he would do. Well, no, that's not true.
The thing is, you could take Tim Lincecum's reworking himself as another just regular spring training story. like spring training hopes. Oh, this guy's reworked his swing. Let's see how he does this season.
Just the thing is, I saw him pitch this spring training, and the changeup that I saw in the way he worked batters was very similar to the way he handled batters back in '08 and that era.
I feel like there's a lot
winning Cy Youngs.
I mean, it's hard to believe he's only 28.
Yeah, he has time, and I feel like with Lincecum, other than just the pitching, like his velocity and the movement on his pitches, there's a lot to do with just his confidence too. Just on the mound every day. And I hope he shaved that mustache that he had last year. That was just terrible.
Yeah, it's
yeah, thank God. It was awful, but I feel like this team's gonna be it's not gonna be a definite 90-win team, but it's gonna be at least high 80s. But they're not allowed to win this year. I'm not gonna let them.
They're not allowed.
They're not allowed to.
One thing I really
well, you should let them know, just so they're clear.
I'll write them a letter.
One thing that worries me a lot about this team is that, as Russell Westbrook just records his 7th triple-double and 5th in his last 6 games, I believe.
Did we just switch over to the
I just have to
podcast?
mention that. That's pretty ridiculous.
Okay.
But
Confused. What that had to
7
do with
minutes
the
left in the 4th quarter. But,
Confused.
one thing I hate about this team is that it's really two things, but essentially it's the same idea. They have absolutely no depth.
Yeah.
They have no top prospects coming. They really have
That's some good pitching prospects coming.
none that I know of.
I know they've got a few right-handed pitchers that are coming up through the ranks right now. So
Bring them up if you know about them. I just was looking at the top 30 prospects according to MLB.com, and none of them were Giants. So
their bullpen concerns me.
I like their bullpen actually.
They have
bullpen is
have
really
good players.
I've never heard anybody say that about the Giants in the past 5 years.
I think it's their strength right now. I don't really like anything about him except for
except for Bumgarner in that rotation. There's so many. I don't know how. I mean, I like Hudson and Peavy, but I don't know how they're gonna do in another year.
To be honest, I think
they're gonna be fine.
Their team looks a lot like last year's Royals.
Except they don't have guys if you would rank Jared Dyson and Lorenzo Cain's speed in like the show, their speed would be 120 out of 100.
Okay, but they have like guys. Honestly, Angel Pagan is the same type of player. And
Angel Pagan. I'm a big Angel Pagan
like
fan.
they have Brandon Bell is essentially Eric Hosmer's production. Their whole entire. If you really compare player to player, they only have one pitcher who you really trust. You can guarantee he's going to be good next year. And, Lindsay might be that Ventura who is going to be really good next year, or Kane. I mean, they have Hudson is that, that Vargas consistent guy. Both have great bullpens. I think Pence is essentially, Alex Gordon. I mean, that's a very similar build team, and I think there's no way they'll make the playoffs next year.
Speaking of Hunter Pence, you might as well mention
he's out 6 to 8 weeks.
Yeah,
might as well mention that.
They're not making the playoffs next year. There's no way.
They have that competition in that division, and just skyrocketed with the Padres off season this year. I feel like right now it would be the Padres and Giants going for that wild card spot, because the Dodgers are going to just run away with that division.
Well, I think you'll have some central teams in the mix too.
Oh no, I'm talking about I'm talking about in that
from that division.
From that division, it's gonna be those two teams, and
yeah. I was gonna mention about Angel Pagan that he is, when he's healthy, very comparable to Jose Reyes in my opinion, in the way he plays and his abilities. He's a center fielder that really good defensively when he's healthy. He can go out there and hit just as well as Jose Reyes, I think, when he's healthy as well. And, that's just that kind of player. He's just not been there a lot of the time, and they haven't had that kind of spark at the top of that lineup that they've needed necessarily. Gregor Blanco, great backup center fielder, not quite Angel Pagan. So I think the general consensus is that we don't even want them to win because we just want to see them win in 2016 again.
Yeah. I'm sorry,
And
Giants fans.
You know,
They have
would have been really
they have
interesting if they signed James Shields like they almost did.
that would have been different. That would have been a different conversation right there, concerning their rotation. So
I'm sorry, Giants fans.
But as of right now, I think they're in a point where they can stay afloat for now, keep a lot of their pieces. You talked about not having a lot of depth. You know, hopefully they can work on that this season and try to develop a better prospect.
I mean, I think it's
of some
actually
sort,
interesting is that, like, I think the NL of this year has 3 great teams, and then just has a huge drop off to, like, just so many just okay teams that it's really gonna be hard. I think it's really one of the few years, maybe it's every year like this, but I think this is a great example of what that 2 wild card spots does, because in both leagues, I have no idea who's gonna get them. There's literally, it could be anyone, almost, except maybe like the Astros, or the Phillies, but I mean, for all we know, the Giants are just gonna end up changing their minds and switch to odd years. So
they're just gonna switch, and then maybe they'll change their mind again after this year. So
I mean,
that'd work out for them if they just went every single year,
what's
right?
their manager's name again?
Bruce Bochy.
I never bet against Bruce Bochy, that's for sure.
Right. I mean, we've learned not to bet against this team for the most part.
Except in odd
sit
years.
there, talk about their issues, and then watch them play through those issues somehow.
How many wins do you guys think they'll have next year? If you put a number on it.
87.
High 80s.
That's not a number.
I'll have 87.5.
86.75.
Okay, you guys are... Okay, I think we're all in the general area there with win total anyway. So, that's gonna conclude this podcast. I don't know what to say about that. Anyway, that was our little fantasy edition. We'll be more or less back to talking about some of the top stories and happenings. No, again, not as many transactions between teams and off-season happenings, as spring training is currently going on and the regular season is right around the corner, and we're going to be hyped for that as well. So, as usual, we will accept any questions and any feedback you have for us.
We would love any questions just on fantasy itself too. We'll be right there to answer anything.
Right, of course. We're more than happy to be somewhat of fantasy consultants. I know we'll be spending a fair amount of time paying attention to our own teams.
But we'll help you too.
Yep, of course. And you can let us know in the comments, or you can email us at warandpeacebaseball@gmail.com.
Tweet us.
Or, go and tweet us at WPB_podcast. And that is about it. So that is going to conclude it for this week. We'll be back next week. That is all. Farbode, where's my adios?
Adios.